From being the lamest of all the dudes in the Avengers, to not having the same on-screen presence as Scarlett Johansson, here's why Hawkeye should have died instead of Black Widow. I'll start with the most obvious reason. Nat's a woman, and that's important because in the OG group of Avengers, there were no other women. Come to think of it, there were no people of color either, unless you count Nick Fury. Clint Barton, and I mean no disrespect, was just another white dude in the group, and compared to the team's other white dudes, he wasn't even that impressive. Superhero stories these days should be as inclusive as they can be, and Natasha Romanoff carried the whole burden of female representation by herself, all the way till Wanda Maximoff was introduced in Avengers Age of Ultron, 3 years after the first Avengers. Now, we probably could have used more women in the first Avengers squad, but I guess I don't mind so much since Nat pulled it off so well. Despite not having any superpowers, Black Widow was badass, with none other than Captain America counting her as his most dependable ally. What she lacked in superpowers and gadgets, she more than made up with skill and tenacity. The fact that she was down in the trenches repelling an alien invasion was really cool, and it got lots of young girls shopping for some Black Widow merch. While we're talking about skill, Hawkeye's kind of a boring hero. The MCU's done a good job of making us care about who these people are under the mask. But they're still superhero movies, and the punch-ups are a key ingredient in the recipe. Nat was one of the hand-to-hand fighters of the team, and despite lacking Cap's super soldier serum, she could take down a room full of bad guys no sweat. I mean, she was hired to be Tony Stark's bodyguard, and that guy has a billion-dollar suit of armor. In her solo movie, we saw her taking on Taskmaster, who had superhuman fighting abilities, and she was able to hold her own against him. That's saying nothing of her going toe-to-toe with other widows like herself, or the Ultron drones, or Thanos' hordes. Although Hawkeye's also a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, he doesn't have her fighting skills. As we saw in his show, the guy can throw a punch, but set him against anyone with real fighting skills, and he'll be in trouble. Both Echo and Yelena were much younger than him, and he took a heck of a beating from both of them. Not to diminish those women and their abilities, but it's a bad look for Clint. He couldn't even beat Nat in a fight, and that's literally why she's dead, and he's alive. Talk about the irony. He's perfectly fine sitting far away from the action and shooting people with his arrows. But come on, James Bond is just a human being, and he's more fun to watch than that. Besides aesthetics, there's an important reason why the differences in their abilities are important, and that comes down to the kinds of stories you can tell. With the popularity of the Captain America trilogy, it's safe to say that fans could use some more Marvel spy movies. Who would you rather see in a spy story? The badass femme fatale, who can infuse a story with complexity, danger, and sexiness? Or the guy who sits in a corner and shoots arrows at people? Pretty obvious choice here, and the writers and editors at Marvel Comics have known about this for a long time. While the MCU doesn't directly adapt storylines from the comics, their approach is definitely informed by the source material. There's some great Hawkeye content in the pages of Marvel's comics, but all of those are in team books, and the only standout comic starring him is Matt Fraction's solo title. That run was adapted into the Hawkeye TV show, so we're all out of good solo content for Clint. On the other hand, lots of writers have taken a crack at writing Black Widow solo books, and they've come up with some really cool stories. If Nat were around now, she'd make for a good change of pace from most Marvel films, and that's something the MCU could use right now, since most of the movies in the multiverse saga are either too far out or too down to earth. Not only are we not getting that, we barely got any character development for her, and by the time we got a look under Nat's mask, it was too late. Before Avengers Endgame, Nat appeared in 6 movies, yet you could summarize her entire character from those movies in a few lines. First, she's hot, and second, she's not one to mess with in a fight. Later on, we got to see her friendship with Steve, and they tried to do a romance between her and Bruce Banner before coming to their senses. That's not a lot, considering how much character development we got for all the other Avengers. Clint was in fewer movies than Nat, but fans got to see that he has a wife and kids, and they live on a farm when Clint isn't out avengering. Because we knew this about Clint, we got a pretty dramatic start to Endgame, as Clint sees his family turn to dust before his eyes. That feeds into his character arc for the movie as well, with him becoming the Ronin and his guilt pushing him to try to sacrifice himself for the Soul Stone. How come we didn't get anything like that for Nat? In Endgame, all we see is that she considers the Avengers her family and that's it. This makes her role in the Soul Stone sacrifice feel kinda hollow, since as far as we knew, Clint had more to lose than she did. Killing off Clint in Endgame would have left the door open for Nat's character development, but her big movie came out years after Endgame, and we found that she has this whole backstory and a family of her own. Well, they're not biologically related to her, they are part of her cover story. But by the end of the movie, she does come to accept the gaggle of weirdos she grew up with as her true family. Florence Pugh stole our hearts as Yelena Belova, a little sister so lovable, she's poised to fill the hole Nat left behind. Alexei Shostakov, the Red Guardian, is funny, not to mention that the idea of a Captain Soviet Union is actually really interesting. Melina Vostokov is a really tragic character, so damaged by the Red Room that she contributed to their operations. But Nat gave her an opportunity to redeem herself by defeating General Dreykov. These characters are so much cooler than Clint's family, who are just two boys, a girl, and Laura Barton, a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. The good news is that we'll be seeing a lot more of Yelena, and Alexei is making a comeback in the Thunderbolts movie. But as far as their relationships with Nat are concerned, this one movie's the most we'll ever see. So many Marvel fans loved Yelena and Natasha's relationship, so it's a shame that Marvel will never get to flesh out that relationship. On top of that, the potential of this backstory to make her sacrifice even more powerful was also wasted. We've compared the two characters a lot, but Nat even had a better actress. In fact, Scarlett Johansson's one of the best actors the MCU has ever had, and that's saying something. Lots of top-tier actors have done their tours of duty through the MCU, from Benedict Cumberbatch to Paul Rudd to Dave Bautista. But in the beginning, things were a lot different. Robert Downey Jr. was a talented actor, but because of his substance abuse issues, he hadn't gotten to flex that talent much. The other actors were looking to make a name for themselves, and Scarlett stood out in that group. Long before her first MCU appearance in 2010, she'd shown off her incredible acting potential. That potential continued to radiate off her in the MCU as she was head and shoulders above her castmates in the acting department, and she definitely tops Jeremy Renner as an actor. Before you guys start reminding me, I haven't forgotten The Hurt Locker, but it's a bad sign that Renner's best performance came decades ago. Why am I comparing the actors here? Well, I think that for someone like Kevin Feige, the sensible thing to do would be to cut loose your weakest actors and come up with strong material for the strong ones. It's not that no one cared about Renner and Hawkeye. People would be sad to lose him, but there were so many stones left unturned for Nat, and Scarlett had the chops to lead her character through those moments. So there you have it, from not having the same on-screen presence as Scarlett Johansson to being the lamest of all the dudes in the Avengers. That's why Hawkeye should have died instead of Black Widow.